Okay. We got about 20 minutes left in the show. We're going to get right to Q&A. I'm not even going to take a break today.
Okay.
There's just no reason for it. And Charles, while I'm doing that, will you please turn the air conditioning on in here? I am smoking. It's cold today. And so I wore a little sweater, and it is now thundering hot in here. Okay. Hit me, Darren.
All right, here we go. Starting with Jamie. So regarding foreign policy, how do you explain to your average neocon Republican that our foreign policy and the war on terror actually creates more terror?
The easiest way is just to use an example that I've tried to use on this show, which says, hey, if you're some Joe Schmo who's never been really all that political, who's not a bigot or a racist or he's not a religion hater. You're just some dude trying to make a living, trying to provide for his family. And that's most Americans. And it's also most people around the world. And imagine if that's you and you're just hanging out doing your job, and all of a sudden somebody just starts bombing your house and killing your kids and destroying your livelihood, starving your people. How many times, how long would that have to last before you finally decided that you were going to take up arms against this enemy? I mean, look at what happened after 9/11. They killed 3,000 of our people. They leveled 2 buildings. And we invaded a country and slaughtered 100,000 people. That was for 2 buildings. Now imagine if they were carpet bombing your cities. Imagine if everyone you know had either left or died. I mean, the carnage that they're dealing with in places like Syria and Libya and Afghanistan, they're kind of living in the dark ages anyway, but places in Iraq, they're living with a level of carnage and a level of suffering that Americans cannot possibly understand. You really can't. You have to go there and hear the stories and see it for yourself to understand how much carnage and death and destruction that we've laid to bear there in the Middle East. And we've done it either through direct military conflict, through the proxy wars that we're fighting, or through our influence in the area. And to me, it just doesn't. It's not that big of a stretch for someone to understand. Yeah, by doing this the way we're doing it, we are creating more enemies for ourselves. Now, whether or not you agree that the best foreign policy decision is to pull out or not, I mean, I've been the first one to say I don't know what the right decision is, but I know the wrong decision is to continue what we've still been doing. And I happen to believe that if a full-out war, ground campaign, and occupation hasn't eliminated the threat, then perhaps what we should do is just bring our troops home. Perhaps we should stop bombing cities and towns, either directly or through our proxies. Maybe we should stop trying to influence these countries and make demands on them and threaten them. And we should just come home and do our best to cooperate and trade with as many different partners as we can. Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe if we're worried about oil in the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz and some of these other areas where large amounts of shipment for oil and natural gas supplies are transferred, maybe what we should do is invest in a little more energy security here at home. Maybe we open it up and we allow capitalism to flourish and we allow some of these folks to come out and build a new refinery. Or maybe drill for oil off land that they own and that they purchase and own. You see, these are all things that I think about. There are other ways to ensure that we live long and don't suffer that don't include us going overseas and destroying someone else's life, livelihood, and way of life. And so that's the way I would try and explain it to them. And some people will get it and some people won't. Some people are just, they're absolutely are too hard-headed. They've never experienced it. They have no understanding or comprehension of what's actually happening over there. A particular name comes to mind now, but I that's the way I would answer it. Go ahead.
All right. Next question comes from Tyler. He said, what is the most clear, concise argument you can give to someone who is curious about eliminating the Fed, but is not extremely well-versed in monetary policy?
Uh, well, you've got to he's got to get more better versed. I mean, it's not something you can say. You say, well, listen, the Federal Reserve is not a government institution. It is a private. It is a set of private banks that manipulate interest rates in order to ensure that your savings always get smaller. That's what they do. The Federal Reserve exists to ensure, by their own by their own admittance, an an inflation rate of around 2%. That's what they're trying to get to. That means over a 10-year period, they want to ensure that 20% of your savings is wiped out. They're responsible for the largest financial collapses in history. They are culpable in the debasement of our currency, and they are in cahoots with the federal government to work against your interests in favor of their own. I mean, that's all you need to say. They have a government-issued monopoly on controlling the currency. And because of that, you suffer. Your savings suffers. And it needs to stop.
All right, next question comes from Adam. He says, what are some compelling arguments against tariffs? He said, I have many conservative friends and coworkers that are on the Trump train due to his advocacy for tariffs. And he says, I try explaining that overregulation and high tax rates are the reason that companies are moving overseas, and all I get are muddled messages about putting America first and punishing China and Mexico as a response.
Yeah. I know.
The problem is you need new friends.
Yeah, that's the real problem is you need some new friends. It was funny. I saw somebody said, man, I just unfriended the first person on Facebook, and I don't know how. Did I do the right thing? I'm really worried about it. And I was like, dude, I unfriend people in real life all the time. Like, I will check you out of my life so fast if you end up becoming a detriment to me, if you become a drag on my life, or you're one of those people that's always like dragging me down. I don't have time for that. When was the last time? It used to be if we had people in our lives who always talked trash to us, who always made us feel bad about ourselves, that, we just wouldn't hang out with those people anymore. Like, that is a loser. I'm not going to waste my time listening to that guy. Don't call him when we go out because he sucks, right? I still do that all the time. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hang out with that guy. Sometimes my wife gets upset with me because I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to hang out with that guy. And she says, yeah, but you get what I'm saying. Why would you care? And so I think maybe some of it is you need to get some new friends. But above and beyond that, I'm sorry, what was the question again? I got sidetracked on new friends.
What are some compelling arguments against tariffs?
Oh, tariffs. Okay. Here's the biggest problem with tariffs. Tariffs increase the cost that you have to pay for your goods. And they also decrease the incentive for other people to ship here. So, for example, there are a couple of economic principles at work here, one of them being whether or not you have a comparative or an absolute advantage in producing a specific product here at home. And I'm not going to get into the difference between absolute and comparative advantage, but you can read about them online. They just Google them. There'll be an ample amount of information there for you to understand the difference. But just because you have an absolute advantage or a comparative advantage to producing a product in America doesn't mean that you necessarily should. In many times, another country has an advantage far above your own in producing some goods. So take coffee, for example. There are certain places on Earth, Colombia being one of them, that are ideally suited for producing coffee. They can produce it better and cheaper coffee than we ever possibly could. And therefore, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to produce coffee here in America, at least not in large quantities, because our coffee is much worse because of the soil and the altitude and the weather conditions. It becomes much more expensive to produce it here. So it makes far more sense to purchase our coffee from Colombia. But then all of a sudden somebody comes along, some great intellectual giant like Trump, and says, look at all the coffee manufacturers that are moving overseas. They're all going to Colombia because it's cheaper and better to produce coffee down there. We can't allow that to happen. We've got to protect America and protect American coffee growers and all of those bean pickers out there who are working the assembly lines and working out in the fields. Therefore, I'm going to put a massive tariff on coffee coming in from Colombia. I'm going to destroy any advantage that you have as an American citizen for buying cheaper coffee that tastes a whole lot better from some other country. Now, you see how stupid that sounds? Now, same thing applies for manufacturing. Let's say we're manufacturing T-shirts. You know, in Cambodia, the average wage is something like 12 cents an hour. So if you've got some sort of high labor product that requires a lot of manhandling, or you've got a specific industry in which it's very labor intensive, many times it makes sense to move that job to a country where labor costs are much cheaper and then ship the product back over here. It doesn't do us, it's no benefit to us as Americans to continue to produce those things in America, just like it doesn't make sense for us to produce coffee in America. Now, there will still be some T-shirt shops that will produce here in America, and they'll find a way to get by, but they'll never be as competitive as the ones in Cambodia, where they're able to get these guys for $10 an hour to make cheap shirts. The guys in America are going to have to make a different kind of shirt. If they're going to manufacture, it's going to be a higher tech shirt. It's going to be a higher quality shirt. There's going to be something specific about it that makes it a viable product to be made in America versus in Cambodia. The skill set that's required, they don't have in Cambodia, or it would cost a whole lot more and it wouldn't make sense financially to do it in Cambodia. You see what I'm getting at? So putting up tariffs hurts everybody because you now pay more for the products that you buy. Imagine, for example, what the cost for goods would be at someplace like Walmart if President Trump decided that he was going to institute massive fees and fines and import taxes, which is what a tariff is. It's an import tax on countries like China and Mexico. I mean, now all of a sudden everything that you buy doubles or triples. Now, what does that do to the poorest among us who rely on a place like Walmart to be able to keep their standard of living as high as it is? So not only are you punishing yourself because now you're paying more, but you're also punishing the poorest among us who rely on those cheap goods in order to maintain a standard of living that we all enjoy here in America. So what are we supposed to do? In order to punish China and punish Mexico and punish companies that choose to leave, we need to punish ourselves by instituting really high tariffs. It's stupid. It's irrational. It's illogical. Now, one of the things we do have to do is we do have to pay for the cost of importing goods, and there has to be a port system, and that port system has to be funded somehow. So it is reasonable to say, okay, the cost of running the port system, you could call it a tariff if you want to. I would call it a user fee, which is essentially, here's what it costs to hire people and to run this particular port, and therefore your goods will be charged a certain amount of money in order to pay for the cost of operating the port. But beyond that, there is no value to having excess or very high tariffs on importing goods. All you're doing is slitting your own throat. And the real problem is that your friends, who was the guy's name?
Adam,
your friends are economic illiterates. That's the problem, is that they've been so badly failed by the public education system that they can't even see how clearly and how foolish this idea is. And truthfully, I think Trump knows how stupid it is. I don't think he would ever implement those kind of tariffs. I think it's all gamesmanship because Trump is not an idiot. He's not an economic illiterate. What he is, he's a very smart propagandist. And so he recognizes that most of the people in America are economic illiterates like your friends. And he knows by sticking to this mantra of I'm going to punish those evil companies and I'm going to punish China and I'm going to punish Mexico, that he can cull votes. But there is absolutely no benefit to having high tariffs on goods. All you're doing is hurting yourself.
All right, next question comes from Jordan. He wants to know, what is your opinion on groups like the Oath Keepers and 3%ers?
I don't know those groups really well. I know who they are. I know who the Oath Keepers are. I know who 3%ers are. This is what I'll say about it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with having a militia, which is essentially what both of those groups are. They're a militia. I think militias that are designed or that are organized for the overthrow of the government are a danger. I think militias that are organized to help act as security for national defense and that are organized to help during times of national disaster, that those are very good groups to be a part of. I don't see any issue with that at all. I think if you're joining a group that is preparing for government collapse or for government takeover, I think you're likely to find yourself in a prison cell somewhere, and I think that is an unlikely event, and one that is much more likely, and one of the best ways that you can be a benefit is by being by being one of those citizens. If you're going to join a paramilitary organization that works to support the people and works as a net benefit and as a guardian and a safekeeper rather than an avenger. I was watching a show. I don't like most of these paramilitary groups because I didn't really like all the militariness of the military. Like, one of the reasons I went into special operations and I put up with all that crap was so that I didn't have to get a haircut and I didn't have to tuck my shirt in. Like, everybody who's been in the Marines knows what a pain it is. You're walking around, tuck your shirt in, Marine, and you just want to be like, I'm going to choke the life out of you. I hate being a Marine. I hate it. I hate being around Marines, right? Because that's what it is all the time. So it's a lot of yut and a lot of chuh, and it just drives you batty. I loved rolling around in the mud and blowing stuff up. I just didn't like all the militariness of the military. And when I just watched a Discovery Channel video on paramilitary organizations. I think they're called, what are they called? There's several. They're called Watchmen. There's several different groups. There's one here in Kansas called the Watchmen of Kansas. I looked it up after I watched the Discovery Channel piece on it. But I would never join one of those because they dress up in military fatigues and they like to play soldier. And I'm like, dude, you saw how I was dressed when we went to that shooting event. It's just like, look, you got a pair of cargo pants on and a T-shirt. Yep. I mean, do the job. You don't have to have all of this. I mean, they're yelling at guys and calling them stupid and saying that they're effed up and they're yelling, they're making them do push-ups. And I'm like, there's not a chance I'd be involved in one of those groups if that's the way they treat their people. And so I mean, most of them are fat and out of shape and lazy and they don't really know what they're doing. And so I don't know. I'm not particularly interested in joining one of those groups. I wouldn't mind starting my own because mine would be a new tribe, be the tribe of awesomeness,
danger,
and danger.
Excellence.
Do we have that clip? Tell me we've got the clip.
Give me a second.
You've got it somewhere?
Buy some time.
Okay. Because I mean, mine would be super cool. I mean, I'd find a couple of people, former Mossad agents and, a couple some special operations guys who hate military drill as much as I do. And we'd put together a pretty cool QRF force, I think. But something we've never done. But anyway, do you have it or not?
I just had it yesterday. I'm trying to find. I can't remember what we named it.
Okay. But that's what I would say. I don't have a negative opinion of any of those groups, but I would just caution you, if you're going to get involved with one of those, understand what you're committing to up front and what the group is about and what they're going to require of you and what sort of commitment, I guess, not just time commitment. That's not the commitment I'm talking about. What they're going to require for you in terms of ideology in order to be part of the group. Because it is the people who are inside of those groups, I know the types of people who are in those kind of groups, and they are very militant. Let's put it that way. It doesn't mean they're all bad. All right, I guess you can't find it. Dadgummit. I laid it up there for you, and you missed it. All right. Well, guys, I'm sorry I don't have time for more questions. I wish I did. I'm out of time. But I do want to wish you a very happy weekend. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and share it with a friend. Help me we want to try and hit 40,000 listeners before the end of the year.
I'm going to start a new tribe. It's going to be 10 times better. There's going to be 10 times more dancing and fun. It's going to be called Muscle Tribe of Danger and Excellence.
Yes!
Does anyone want to come? It's going to be way better.
It's going to be way better.
Way more dancing and fun. That's the kind of tribe I want to start. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll talk to you Monday.